The glass of wine in front of me had gone warm 20 minutes ago, and I still hadn't decided whether to finish it or order another just to have something to do with my hands. My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 42, and I've spent the better part of the last decade being told, in one gentle way or another, that I should put myself out there again. My sister says it like she's recommending a vitamin. My best friend says it over wine. Usually after her third glass, when she gets nostalgic about the version of me that used to believe in things like butterflies and second dates. I raised 2 kids mostly on my own. I built a career out of stubbornness and spreadsheets. I learned somewhere along the way that being underestimated by a room full of men in blazers was actually a pretty useful skill. So no, I wasn't desperate for romance. I was fine. Genuinely, boringly fine. But my friend Denise had been relentless about this one. He's successful, he's kind, he's normal, she said. Like normal was some rare vintage you had to hunt for. She set the whole thing up. A nice restaurant downtown, the kind with candlelight that flatters everyone and a menu that charges $12 for bread. I told myself I'd give it an hour. I put on the green dress I hadn't worn since my daughter's graduation, the one that makes me feel like a woman and not just somebody's mother. And I walked in 8 minutes early because that's who I am. The hostess seated me at a table for 2 near the window, the kind of table designed for couples to lean into each other over candlelight, not for one woman to sit very straight while checking her phone every 90 seconds like it might apologize on his behalf. 10 minutes passed. I told myself traffic. 20 minutes passed. I told myself parking. At 30, I ordered a glass of wine because sitting there sober felt like admitting something. At 40 minutes, the waiter, a kid who couldn't have been older than my son, started giving me that look. That soft, pitying look people give a woman alone at a table built for romance like I was a display piece in a museum labeled Hope Late 20th Century. I've built boardroom presentations under more pressure than that dinner reservation. And yet somehow, sitting there with an empty chair across from me, I felt more exposed than I had in years. Not heartbroken. I want to be clear about that. Disappointed, maybe. Embarrassed? Definitely. There's a very specific kind of humiliation in being stood up at 42 in nice shoes, in a dress you second-guessed twice in the mirror, surrounded by couples who keep sneaking glances like your solitude is contagious. I checked my phone one more time. No message. No missed call. Just my own reflection in the black screen staring back at me with a kind of patience I didn't know I still had. I could have left right then. Grabbed my coat, paid for my wine, and gone home to reheated leftovers and a rerun of some show I'd already seen twice. That would have been the sensible ending to a very ordinary bad night. But something made me stay in that chair one more minute. Something about the way the evening was about to shift, quietly, without warning, into something I never saw coming. Because right when I reached for my purse to leave, the chair across from me wasn't the only thing that was about to change, that I should be grateful for what I had. Grateful for 2 healthy kids, a house that was paid for, a job that let me leave early for soccer practice. Grateful, as if gratitude was supposed to fill the particular kind of silence that settles into a house once the divorce papers are signed and the last box is unpacked. My ex-husband Michael left when Sophie was 11 and Ryan was 9. There wasn't a dramatic reason, no affair I found out about through a text message, no screaming match the neighbors would remember. Just a slow leak of a marriage that had been running on empty for years until one day he sat me down at the kitchen table and said he didn't love me the way he used to, and I realized I'd been waiting for him to say it first because I didn't have the courage to. For the first few years after, there wasn't room for anything except survival. I went from being a wife to being the only adult in a house with 2 grieving, confused teenagers who needed stability more than they needed a mother who was falling apart. So I didn't fall apart. Not where they could see it. I got them to school. I went to work. I sat through parent-teacher conferences alone and smiled when other couples asked where my husband was, like it was a perfectly normal question with a perfectly normal answer. Somewhere in all of that, I stopped being a person with wants and started being a function. Claire the mom, Claire the employee, Claire who always says she's fine because saying anything else feels like too much work for everyone involved. I told myself it was temporary, that once the kids were older, I'd have time to think about myself again. But the kids got older, and I just found new things to worry about, new versions of putting myself last that felt responsible instead of sad. It was my best friend Denise who finally called it what it was. We were sitting in her kitchen, a bottle of wine between us, and she looked at me over the rim of her glass and said, "Claire, you've turned self-neglect into a personality." I laughed because it was funny, and then I didn't laugh because it wasn't. She'd been divorced 2 years before me and had already cycled through dating apps, bad first dates, and one boyfriend who didn't stick, but she talked about all of it like it was an adventure instead of a minefield. She kept telling me I deserved to want something again, not just for the kids, not just for the house, for me. It took her 3 months to wear me down. 3 months of her sending me profiles, reading me bios in ridiculous voices, telling me I was still the prettiest woman in every room, even if I'd forgotten how to believe it. Eventually, I gave in, mostly to make her stop, and made a profile of my own. I picked photos that felt safe, wrote a bio that felt honest, and told myself I wasn't expecting anything to come of it. Then a man named David messaged me. Charming, funny, seemed to actually read my profile instead of just my photo. We talked for 2 weeks before he asked to meet in person. And when he suggested this restaurant, the one with the low lighting and the wine list longer than the menu, I said yes before I could talk myself out of it. I told Denise, and she nearly cried from excitement. I told my kids I was having dinner with a friend because saying date still felt like a foreign word in my mouth. That's how I ended up here, at a table for two, watching my wine go warm, wondering how long a person is supposed to wait before she admits she's been waiting for nothing. The first text came at 7:52. "Running a little behind, sorry." I told myself that was normal, that 7 minutes meant nothing, that men who looked like his profile picture were allowed 7 minutes. I ordered the wine to have a reason to be sitting there alone, and I checked my phone the way you check a wound, just to see if it's still bleeding. By 8:15, I'd read that text so many times the words had stopped meaning anything. I typed out 3 different replies and deleted all of them because there's a very specific kind of humiliation in sounding needy to a man you've never actually met in person. The second text arrived at 8:20. "Something came up. Can we push to next week?" No explanation. No apology that felt like an apology. Just 5 words engineered to let him disappear without technically being the one who canceled. I looked up, and that's when I noticed the waiter. He was young, maybe 25, and he'd been refilling my water glass with the kind of gentle, unnecessary frequency that told me he'd clocked the situation before I had. He gave me this small, careful smile every time he passed. The kind you give someone at a funeral when you don't know what to say, so you just try to look kind. I wanted to tell him I was fine. I wanted to tell him this wasn't the first time a man had made me feel like an inconvenience he'd scheduled by accident. The couple 2 tables over kept glancing at me too. Not rude, nothing dramatic, just those quick sideways looks people give when they piece together the math. Woman alone, dressed like she mattered, checking her phone every 90 seconds like it might apologize on his behalf. The woman in the couple caught my eye once and gave me this soft, sympathetic, almost smile, the universal signal for, "I see you and I'm sorry." I smiled back like I hadn't noticed anything, like I was simply a woman enjoying wine by herself on a Thursday night, because that felt marginally better than the truth. I thought about leaving. God, I thought about it seriously. Running the math on how fast I could grab my coat and get to my car before anyone registered that the date they'd all been quietly narrating had ended in nothing. It would be so easy. Pay the check, walk out with my head high, let the whole restaurant assume I had somewhere better to be. That's what a smarter woman would have done, probably. That's what my sister would have done. But some stubborn, tired part of me didn't want to give this night the satisfaction of chasing me out the door. I had ordered a good glass of wine. I had put on a dress I liked, the green one that made me feel like myself again after years of feeling like somebody's mother, somebody's ex-wife, somebody's grateful little afterthought. And I decided somewhere between his second text and my third glance at the door that I was going to sit there and finish that wine like I meant to be there all along, so I did. I picked up the glass, ignored the warmth of it, and took a slow sip while the couple at the next table pretended not to watch. I had no idea, not even a little, that the universe was about to make that decision look like the smartest thing I'd done all year. See if it hurt yet. By 8:15, the wine wasn't warm anymore. It was just there, a prop in a play nobody else had shown up to watch. I'd started doing the math women do in these moments, the humiliating arithmetic of how long is too long, how many minutes before staying becomes something you'll cringe about later. I had already imagined the version of tonight I'd tell my best friend Rachel, the funny one, the one where I'd laugh and say men are trash and order dessert out of spite. I hadn't imagined the version where I just sat there, spine straight, pretending to read a menu I'd already memorized while the bartender kept glancing at me with that particular blend of pity and professional discretion. That's when I noticed him. 2 seats down, close enough that I'd registered him the way you register furniture, present but not urgent. He was maybe 32, 33, wearing a gray Henley that fit like it had been chosen on purpose, not by accident. He wasn't staring, which I appreciated. He was watching the way someone watches weather, a passive kind of attention that didn't ask anything of me. I turned back to my phone, to the silence that had replaced the text messages, and told myself it didn't matter what a stranger thought. Then the bartender set a fresh glass of wine in front of me, and I opened my mouth to say there'd been a mistake before I saw the little folded napkin tucked beneath the stem. I almost didn't open it. 42-year-old women don't usually get notes passed to them in bars, not anymore, and some old instinct told me to be suspicious of anything that felt like a plot twist. But curiosity has always been my weakness, so I unfolded it. Whoever he is, he's an idiot. This one's on me, no strings, just solidarity. I laughed before I could stop myself, a real laugh, startled out of me. And when I looked up, he was already smiling like he'd been waiting for exactly that reaction. I promise I'm not usually this forward, he said, sliding 1 seat closer. Close enough now that ignoring him would have taken actual effort. But you looked like you were about to set that menu on fire. I was considering it, I said, slower burn, more dramatic. Fair. Though for the record, whoever stood you up clearly doesn't understand escalation. He tipped his glass toward mine. Name's Jack. Claire, I said, and something in me, some tired, guarded part, noted that I hadn't hesitated to give it. We talked. Not the polite small talk I'd braced for, but something looser, quicker, the kind of conversation that skips the boring warm-up laps and just starts swimming. He asked what I did, and when I told him marketing, he asked which part. Like he actually wanted the real answer instead of the small talk one. He told me he restored old motorcycles on weekends, which struck me as either completely true or an excellent lie, and either way I found I didn't mind not knowing which yet. At one point he said, "For what it's worth, I don't think anyone in their right mind stands you up on purpose." And it should have sounded like a line, should have made me roll my eyes the way I usually did at compliments delivered with too much confidence. Instead, it just landed, quiet and warm, in the space where humiliation had been sitting all night. For the first time since 7:52, I wasn't checking my phone. Just decided to give it 10 more minutes when a voice said, "Is this seat cursed, or can anyone sit here?" I looked up, and there he was, late 20s, maybe 30 at most, with the kind of easy smile that made you forget you were supposed to be careful. "Excuse me," I said, because it was the only thing my brain offered up. "The empty chair," he said, nodding at the one across from me. "I've been watching you not drink that wine for 20 minutes. Either you're waiting for someone or you're building some kind of quiet protest against Chardonnay." I laughed before I could stop myself, a real laugh, the kind I hadn't produced in longer than I wanted to admit. "Both, maybe," I said. "My date didn't show." "His loss," he said, and sat down like it was the most natural thing in the world, like we'd planned it. His name was Daniel. He worked in architecture, he told me, restoring old buildings instead of designing new ones because he liked the idea of giving something a second life instead of starting from nothing. I told him I understood that better than he knew. We talked. God, we talked. About the divorce I didn't mean to bring up, about his own parents' marriage that had fallen apart when he was in college, about how we'd both learned to distrust the version of love that looked perfect from the outside. He asked questions like he actually wanted the answers, not the polite kind people ask while checking their phones. I found myself telling him things I hadn't told my closest friends, about the loneliness that lived in a house even when it was full of noise, about how strange it was to rebuild a life at 42 when everyone around you assumed you'd already finished building it. At some point, the restaurant staff started stacking chairs around us, and I realized we'd been there almost 3 hours. 3 hours, and it had felt like 20 minutes. But even as I laughed at his jokes, even as I felt something warm and unfamiliar unfurling in my chest, a colder voice kept interrupting. He's younger than you. People will look at you two and do the math. They'll assume things. They'll say things. I thought about the women at work who whispered about anyone who dated younger, the word desperate hovering just under their breath. I thought about my ex-husband's new girlfriend, 26, and how everyone had called that understandable, while I imagined the opposite would be called something else entirely. Daniel must have noticed the shift in my face because he tilted his head and said, "Where'd you go just now?" "Nowhere," I said too quickly, "just thinking." "About the math," he said, like he'd read my mind. "The age thing." I felt my cheeks go hot. "That obvious?" "You get a little quiet right before you spiral," he said, smiling gently. I noticed it happens right after I say something that makes you smile too much. I didn't know whether to laugh or apologize. Instead, I just looked at him. This stranger who somehow already understood the rhythms of my own self-doubt better than men I'd dated for years. "For what it's worth," he said, "I'm not doing math. I'm just enjoying the conversation." I wanted to believe him. Some reckless, quiet part of me already did. Could manage without sounding like a woman who'd been abandoned at a table built for two. "Every seat in this place is cursed after 7, he said, sliding into it, before I could answer properly, like the question had been rhetorical all along. "Trust me, I've tried them all." I should have told him the seat was taken. That would have been the safe thing, the polite thing, the thing that kept the evening tidy and explainable. Instead, I just watched him settle in, unbothered, like showing up uninvited to a stranger's disaster was something he did on a regular Tuesday. My phone buzzed against the tablecloth. I didn't look at it right away. Some part of me already knew. When I finally turned it over, there it was. "So sorry about tonight. Work emergency, total mess. Can we try again this weekend? I promise I'm not usually like this." 7 words too late and somehow still asking for the benefit of the doubt. I read it twice. The way you reread something hoping the second pass will feel different from the first, it didn't. It just sat there, polite and hollow. The kind of apology that costs the sender nothing and asks the receiver for everything. "Bad news?" the man across from me asked, not fishing, just noticing, the way people notice weather changing. "My date," I said, and it came out flatter than I meant it to. "He's not coming. He's sorry. He wants to reschedule." "And are you going to?" That was the question, wasn't it? The easy answer was yes. Say yes, thank him for the apology, finish the wine alone with the plan intact, go home, wait for the weekend, let the evening end exactly the way it was supposed to on paper. Nothing risked, nothing embarrassing, nothing to explain to myself in the shower later. That was the path with guardrails. I could already see the whole shape of it, predictable as a rerun. Then there was this. A stranger who apparently found cursed chairs, half-finished wine, and stood-up women worth sitting down for. No script, no plan, no idea where the next 10 minutes led, let alone the next hour. Just a face that hadn't earned my trust yet, and a voice that made the not knowing feel less like danger and more like air after a long time underwater. I thought about the house, paid for and quiet. The job that let me leave for soccer practice and nothing else. The gratitude I'd been rationing out to myself like it was supposed to be enough. And I thought, not for the first time that year, that safe had already had its turn. Safe had had years. No, I said, before I could talk myself out of it, sliding my phone face down like I was closing a door. I don't think I am. He raised an eyebrow, something like delight moving behind it. Bold. Don't make it weird, I said, though some reckless, unfamiliar part of me hoped he would anyway. The waiter came by then, glancing between the two of us like he was trying to solve a math problem that didn't add up on paper. I ordered another glass of wine. This time I wasn't drinking alone. Been the smart thing, the safe thing, the thing my sister would have told me to do. Instead, I said nothing, and my silence was its own kind of answer. His name was Daniel, and I want to tell you the rest of that night felt like fireworks, but it didn't. It felt quieter than that. It felt like exhaling after holding your breath for longer than you realized. We talked until the restaurant started stacking chairs around us, and when he asked for my number, I gave it to him without the usual internal committee meeting I hold before doing anything that might matter. That was 2 years ago. I wish I could tell you love fixed everything. That one dinner rewired every insecurity I'd been carrying since my divorce, but that's not how healing works. What changed wasn't that a man showed up. What changed was that I did. Somewhere between the wine going warm and a stranger asking if the seat was cursed, I stopped auditioning for people who couldn't be bothered to show up for their own lives, let alone mine. I stopped shrinking myself down to a size that made absent men comfortable. I stopped treating my own time like it was worth less than someone else's convenience. Daniel and I are still together. And no, this isn't a fairy tale where everything is soft lighting and easy mornings. We argue about dumb things like whether the dishwasher is a suggestion or a rule, but he shows up. Every single time he shows up. And after years of men who treated commitment like an inconvenience, that ordinary reliability still feels like a miracle I don't take for granted. The real shift, though, wasn't him. It was me learning that being stood up wasn't a verdict on my worth. It was information about someone else's character. I spent so many years after my divorce believing that if I was interesting enough, patient enough, low maintenance enough, the right man would finally decide I was worth his effort. What I didn't understand back then is that you cannot convince someone to choose you. You can only decide what you're willing to accept while you wait for someone who already knows your value without being taught. I think about that 7 o'clock reservation sometimes, the one where a man's profile picture ordered wine and never came to drink it. I used to think that night was about rejection. Now I know it was about redirection. Every door that doesn't open is just a hallway pointing you somewhere else, somewhere you probably wouldn't have walked toward on your own. So if you're sitting somewhere right now, checking your phone the way you check a wound, wondering if you've waited long enough to leave with your dignity intact, let me tell you what I wish someone had told me. You are allowed to stop waiting. You are allowed to close the tab, cancel the reservation, and decide that your evening and your life deserves better company than absence. Because sometimes the person who doesn't show up is doing you the strange backwards favor of making room for the one who will. If this story felt like it was speaking to something in your own life, stay with me. There's more where this came from, and trust me, you'll want to see where the next one goes.